13th of June at 4 o'clock. Jennifer, could you please do a roll call vote? A roll call?
Yes. First, we have Chair Blue,
Here.
Vice Chair Hunter. I think is absent. If he arrives, I will mark the time of his arrival. We have Commissioner Carter, who has previously let us know that she would not be here today. Committee Member Ostapar.
Here.
Committee Member Polly.
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Schmidt. Here. Committee Member Tregenza.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a total of 5 committee members present today.
Great. Let's open the consent agenda. It looks like we have the minutes and something on 35 Sierra Vista Drive. Do we have any, well, can we please make the announcement on how the public can join in, Jennifer?
Yes, definitely. We do encourage members of the public to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/City of Monterey with a 10-second delay and Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you would like to provide public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone, making sure to join in time to accommodate delays. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers provided on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. Since the meeting has begun, you'll find the agenda under the Recent tab. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, toll free. Once again, that phone number to call is 833-568-8864, and it is toll free. You will need the webinar ID for this meeting. It is 161-914-9563. Once again, this meeting's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. If the first phone number does not work, try another. There are more listed on the meeting agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. Prompted for a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions for using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. Please turn off TV or computer speakers or go to another room while connected, as background noise interferes with the broadcast. Public speakers will be called upon in order of hands raised. There is a 3-minute time limit for today's meeting, so please stay within that limit. And let me just see, there is one attendee without their hand raised. So just a reminder, if you're joined by Zoom and you want to comment on the minutes, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of this screen.
Thanks, Jennifer.
No problem. Still see no hands raised, so go ahead.
Okay. Do we want to move forward and on the consent items? Do we have a motion or any comment? I'm assuming if Fernando's there, we'll break these up into 2 votes.
Yes, you can, or you can just do one to approve both.
Does anybody have any objections to that on the committee?
I'm going to recuse myself from the minutes because I wasn't here last meeting. So I don't know if that changes anything.
Oh, yes, then you're gonna have to do a separate motion then.
Okay, why don't we just do 2? Do I have a motion for the minutes for the 1 June meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So that's a motion by Justin and seconded by Shelley. Any further discussion? Jennifer, could you do a roll call?
Definitely. Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter is absent. Committee Member Carter is also absent. Committee Member Ostavar,
Aye.
Committee Member Polly,
Aye.
Committee Member Schmidt. I'm sorry, I don't think we heard that. Oh, it looks like you're muted.
Aye.
Thank you. We just need that verbal clarification. And Committee Member Tregenza.
Abstain.
Great, thank you. Those minutes are approved.
Okay, let's move on to the second item on the consent agenda, which is consider 35 Sierra Vista Drive Architectural Review Permit ARP -22-0054 for preliminary and final architectural review of a second-story addition at the rear of an existing two-story single-family dwelling. Do we have any discussion on that item? If not,
Jennifer,
yeah.
if there's someone from the public that wants to make a comment?
I see no hands raised right now. But to join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864 toll free. Once again, that phone number is 833-568-8864. Then enter the webinar ID 161-914-9563. Once again, the webinar ID for this meeting is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom.
Thanks, Jennifer.
No problem.
Does somebody want to make a motion for this?
I had a quick question. I just
Sure.
heard, Jennifer, you say that to go to iSearch Monterey for the agenda and packet, and I'm on there right now and I'm not seeing it. So I don't know if
It's in the consent agenda, so it should be at the top, item number 3.
Yeah, but the agenda isn't on iSearch.
it's not on.
Oh,
Since the meeting has begun, it will be under the recent tab. So there's on iSearch, if you scroll down a little bit after all of the council meetings, there's a tab with the rest of the meetings, and there's a current or recent meetings. So it's under, oh, thank you.
There it is. Yep.
Under the recent tab. That was helpful.
Yep. Just heard you mention it to people viewing. So, okay. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
okay, do we want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve consent item number 3, 35 Sierra Vista Drive AR permit ARP 220054 for preliminary final architectural review of a second-story addition at the rear of an existing two-story single-family dwelling.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion is made by Patrick and seconded by Shelley. Jennifer, could you do a roll call vote?
Definitely. First, we have Chair Bluth.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter is absent, and Committee Member Carter is absent. Committee Member Ostavar.
Aye.
Committee Member Polly.
Aye.
Committee Member Schmidt.
Aye.
Committee Member Tregenza.
Aye.
Great. This consent item is approved with the vote of 5.
Thank you. Why don't we move on to consent items not on the agenda? Is there anyone in the public or on committee members that have an item that's not on the consent agenda? I don't see anyone with their hands raised. Do you, Jennifer?
No, I don't, but just in case we have any viewers at home who would like to comment on items not on the agenda, To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864 toll free. Once again, that number is 833-568-8864. Then enter the webinar ID 161-914-9563. Once again, the webinar ID for this meeting is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide public comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon.
Thanks, Jennifer.
We did.
I don't see anyone, so why don't we close public comment and move to the first public appearance item?
Okay.
So that is consider 165 via Gayuba application ARP 22-0062 for preliminary and final architectural review of a second story addition and setback variation at the existing single family residence. Does staff have a presentation?
So this item is recommended to be continued to the July 6th, 2022 meeting because the noticing requirement to install story poles was not done in time.
Okay. Do we need to do anything, Fernanda, or can we just move on?
You need to make a motion.
Okay. Should I make the motion or does another committee member have to do it?
Anyone can do it. It just needs to be seconded and voted on.
I'll make a motion to continue item number 5 to the next ARC meeting. Do we have a second?
Item number 5. It's item number.
Oh, item number 4, I'm sorry. Do we have a second for
A
that?
second. This is Justin.
Thanks, Justin. Can we do a roll call vote for that, Jennifer?
Definitely. We have Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter, and Committee Member Carter are absent. Committee Member Ostavar,
Aye.
Committee Member Polly,
Aye.
and Committee Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Member Tregenza.
Aye.
Thank you. This item is continued. Oh, we do need to pick a date certain if we're continuing it.
Bob said next meeting.
Oh,
So-
okay, July 6th. I'm gonna note that. Thank you. This item is continued to July 6th, 2022 ARC meeting. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the public appearance item is 522 Larkin. I'm within 500 feet of that house, so I'm going to have to recuse myself. Patrick, do you think you could manage that item for the committee? And then maybe Fernanda can phone me when I can come back online.
Yeah, no problem, Bob.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to close off and I'll wait for Fernanda to call me.
Thanks. Bob.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. All right, next on our agenda, item number 5, consider 522 Larkin Street architectural review permit ARP 21-0211 for preliminary and final architectural review of a second story accessory dwelling unit addition above an existing garage and access stair and deck. Staff presentation.
Hello, my name is Chris Schmidt. I'm a senior associate planner for the city of Monterey, and I've been working with the applicant and property owner for this project. So the staff recommendation, let's see if I can hide this a little bit better. The staff recommendation is to approve the architectural review permit with conditions of approval. Here we see the subject property that's located in the Old Town Monterey neighborhood. It is a double fronting lot that fronts both Larkin Street and the Ord Street alley. The subject building is at the rear. You can see it's a small garage. And then there's a duplex at the site at the front fronting Larkin Street. So moving on to the existing and proposed site plan, this is kind of a combined survey that shows the existing condition and the footprint of the proposed addition and deck. You can see that existing garage. It's basically right at the property line at the rear. And then the orange outline I added to show that the second story would be located above. You see on the north side, it does cantilever out towards the side property line. And then on the right-hand side, you see the deck and stair, which would be the main access to the ADU. Here are floor plans of the first story and proposed ADU. As I mentioned, there would be a deck. It would be made from redwood. Technically, it's the front of the ADU, but it's not visible from Ord Street. That would be the main access to the ADU, and then we have a 2-bedroom ADU at the second floor with a kitchen, a small dining room, living room, and a bathroom. So here we see the front elevation where the entrance is. You can see it's a side gable addition with a kind of a front gable at the front there, and then they're going to have cement plaster exterior siding. There'd be comp shingles, as I mentioned, a redwood deck, and a number of different window types on other elevations as well. So the existing footprint of the garage would be maintained. We went through a few different design iterations where I think the property owner wanted to expand the garage, but because of some of the development standard constraints that are applicable to basically all development except for ADUs, they couldn't expand the garage. So we came to a compromise and felt that this design appeared to be appropriate for the neighborhood, and I can elaborate on that if we have questions. But here are the side elevations. So I will also add, this project, the city had changed the ADU ordinance at the beginning of, well, actually, I believe it was at the end of last year. We had adopted new ADU policies that allow second story additions in the R3 zone, and staff had come to a conclusion that there would still be some challenges for ADU development, and we actually did move forward with additional amendments that would enable projects like this. And so this project is still subject to the same findings that the Architectural Review Committee is used to for addition projects. There are also additional findings that the second story additions have to be compatible with the site and surrounding neighborhood. And likewise, typically roofs have to match the primary dwelling on site. And the primary dwelling for this site is generally a flat roof. One of the amendments that staff made and was ultimately adopted by the city council was that the Architectural Review Committee can find that the proposed roof style is appropriate for the site and the surrounding neighborhood. And so staff was able to make that finding here. But moving on to the findings, the first being the proposed siding, form, mass, and architectural style are appropriate. This development meets the required standards for ADUs and general development, including setback requirements. The massing is appropriate in that it's consistent with the surrounding multifamily building massing. The style is compatible with the primary structure and very, very similar to the surrounding structures. And then the proposed gable roof is compatible with the primary structure and the surrounding neighborhood. The primary structure, as I mentioned, is a flat roof, but you can see slope proof elements from the front. And because of the topography, it's actually fairly difficult to discern whether the primary structure is only flat roof. So in that same light, the addition is actually really not visible except for maybe the corners of the building from Larkin Street. And then a counterpoint is that from Ord Street, the primary structure is also not visible. So in addition to consistency with the surrounding neighborhood, staff was able to make that finding that although the roof is different from the primary, it is appropriate. The next finding is that the views, privacy, and living environment are not unreasonably impaired. There were no impacts identified with this project. I had been to the site several times in the last almost a year that we've been working, that I've been working on this project. I've talked to the neighbors that are directly across Ord Street. The new gable would basically still be below their deck railings, and so there was really a limited impact there. And then there would be no deck on that side, and so the neighbors across the street wouldn't have any sort of privacy or other sorts of concerns. And like I said, I talked to the neighbors and they seem to really not have any issue. So staff was able to make that finding that the project does not unreasonably impair views, privacy, and living environment. The project must be consistent with city plans and design guidelines. Staff was able to make that finding. And then lastly, the exterior finish, colors, materials, and all other features are appropriate. Staff was able to make this finding. The materials would generally match the primary structure with the exterior stucco or cement plaster. And then staff has included some conditions of approval to further make them a little bit more consistent with the primary structure. And those conditions are that the exterior materials, including the cement plaster and tile or shingles, match the primary structure. The primary structure has some tile shingles, and it was the hope from staff that even like a red or rust colored composite would still be fairly close to that, knowing that really the only people who will see both buildings at one time are both the neighbors on either side of the lot. And even then you may not see the tiles. The other and the applicant has implemented these changes on the plans that I've shown today. The second condition would be that the windows within 10 feet of shared property lines be changed to opaque and inoperable or clerestory with a minimum height of no less than 6 feet. And he's also made that change as well. So staff's recommendation again is to approve the project. I am available for questions and the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Do any committee members have any questions for staff? Other than me? I noticed earlier, I don't know if this is the same project, you had some like Google Earth pictures. Are there any pictures of this other than just like line drawings?
Yeah, so I pulled up, let me share my screen again. I pulled up Google Maps, Street View, just in absence of, it's usually a little easier to kind of get the full context of the site is what I've noticed usually. So this is the garage that's proposed to be renovated with the second story ADU. And the one lot I wanted to point out was directly next door. They kind of have a very similar concept, a cantilevered second unit above a garage. It's a one car garage, but very much similar in kind of scale and style. Looking at both sides of Ord Street here, it's kind of all these fairly large multifamily buildings. And so I think that staff felt that this proposed design was very much fitting with the surrounding slope roof styles, and just generally the massing. And let me go to Larkin Street as well. So This home with the brick is the primary structure. And as you can see, I mentioned it is generally a flat roof structure, but they do have these kind of shed roof elements that are kind of difficult to see here, but it does have the appearance of having some sort of sloped roof. And as you'll note, it's still pretty difficult, at least on Google Maps here, to see whether or not you'll see that addition. And from visiting the site in the field, I was maybe able to see a small amount of orange netting on either side of the home that is just barely visible.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to make a presentation? Are they here? So please welcome, and please state your name.
Green light on your budget.
Oh, that might help. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Mckellen, the designer and general contractor. I've been working with the property owners for 1.5 years, and as Chris said, we got all the bugs out of this thing, and we're looking forward to moving forward to the building department. The gable roof is the preferred roof of the property owner. Going through several different designs, and that's why we've worked with Chris Smith on this. Chris Smith. And also I gave Chris a PowerPoint, but it's really not necessary to see. Even over on between Jefferson and Franklin towards the Presidio, there's a number of old Monterey style architectural homes that have different architectural apartments in their rear properties. So what we're proposing here is pretty consistent with the whole neighborhood. I really don't have much else I can add, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Mckellen from the committee? Thank you.
Okay.
So we'd like to open this for public comments. Jennifer, can you make the announcement on how to do that via Zoom? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Members of the public are encouraged to join our meetings via ZoomGov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers provided on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. Since the meeting has begun, you'll find the agenda under the Recent tab. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864 toll free, then enter the webinar ID. That phone number once again is 833-568-8864, and the webinar ID is 161-914-9563. Once again, this meeting's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. And I do see a couple of attendees, but no hands raised. So I think it's safe to assume they do not want to comment. Oh, wait, a hand just went up. We have the phone number, last digits 459. Please state your name for the record if you feel comfortable doing so. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello?
We can, thank you. Would you mind providing your name for the record?
Sure, I'm the property owner. My name is Richard Aiello.
Thank you. Oh, let me set your timer. Sorry about that.
Okay, am I clear to speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to, thank the planning department there, the staff, Chris, and everybody else that's been involved with this project. We started the process in early 2020, and I just want to say that we have been super patient with all of the entire process and what it's put us through. We've waited for the city to draft the ordinance to allow for the height issue. We've waited and for the city to approve a revision of that ordinance. So we've been super patient and we followed the guidance of Chris and the other planners since day one. And all I want to say, first of all, is thank you for all their time, but I hope the Architectural Review Committee would take into consideration all the time we spent. We're looking at a 2-year process here, whereas other cities could get this done in a relatively short period of time. We have undergone a 2-year process. So with that being said, I appreciate your consideration. Again, as Steve Mckellen just pointed out, we are doing nothing different than what's already in the neighborhood. If you look at the properties from Van Buren Street all the way up to the DLI, you will notice in various properties the same sort of house front structure, apartment design in the back, just like we're proposing. We've had intentions of doing this for over 20 years. It never came to fruition due to the floor area ratio and all the other constraints, zoning constraints. Now with the new ADU law that's been, provided by the state, we're very hopeful that this will get approved so we could, build this unit and provide additional housing, the much needed additional housing in our communities. Originally, the original proposal, I just want to mention, called for a 3-car garage rather than a 2-car garage, because living on Larkin Street, I could tell you that parking's always been a problem. I could have originally just built the ADU in the garage and been within the ADU regs, but my intent is to continue providing the additional parking spaces, taking the cars off the street, because parking is a serious issue on Larkin Street, especially if you get home at about 5 p.m. in the evening. When everybody gets off work, there's nowhere to park. So we're not only, spending 2 extra years, in my opinion, is what it's taken, but our intent has always been to keep the parking that's there. The intent is to keep the parking that's there, and I hope you guys take that into consideration and approve this project. I want to once again thank Chris and all his team and Steve Mckellen. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Aiello. Any other public comments, Jennifer?
That was the only hand I saw raised. Once again, if you're in Zoom, you can provide public comments by using the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen. Or if you're calling by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. No hands are raising.
Okay, in that case, I'd like to close public comments. Do any AR committee members have any comments on this project?
I'll just make a quick comment. Sounds like the applicant's a little frustrated with the process, and I can sympathize with them on that. Getting permits these days, particularly with the evolving regulatory environment, is challenging. So, yeah, I know the staff is working as hard as they can to get through this, and that it can be frustrating to people on the other side of the table. We need to approve these things. It doesn't feel like it's it's violating any of the zoning restrictions. It's definitely a back alley structure, and it looks like there's been a lot of similar structures built in that back alley. I didn't quite understand the whole comment on getting the asphalt shingles to match the color of the Spanish tiles in front. I would probably refrain from doing that and just do a regular color asphalt shingle and try to make it a red or something like that. The architecture and design of this, I'll be honest, and I'll just say I think it's a little ungainly the way the upper level cantilevers over the bottom floor. Obviously, it's been done down the street. I think it looks a little ungainly there. Architecturally, again, I would always love to see these things match the building to which they're accessory to. Obviously, the precedent is there in Monterey that these sort of stucco boxes have been put in the back of structures regardless of what's in the front. But we have opportunities here to do things better, given that we're increasing density and adding housing. It's going to be a thing of the future. And so hopefully we can be a little bit more thoughtful in the design. But all in all, I don't see any reason to fully reject this thing, given that they've sort of fought to get it through, and it's consistent with the zoning regulations. That's all I've got to say.
Thanks, Justin. Any other comments?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think, I mean, I was seeing some similar things, but I think the eclectic nature of the alleys and things, it seems reasonable to have something like this. I did agree with the only comments I was going to make are related to the ones that Chris already added. I think making it looked like in the drawings that there was kind of part of it was siding and the other part was stucco. So I agree with the requirements to make it all one appearance that matches as much as it can the main dwelling. As far as the shingles go, just in Google Earth, you can see the other adjacent buildings have kind of a color. So that seems to make sense as well. But so generally, I agree with the conditions put on it by staff, and agree that we need to be making more of these, and adding something in these alleys seems like something not very imposing.
Thank you. Any other comments? Would somebody like to make a motion to consider or either approve or disapprove of agenda item number 5? Well, as a committee member, I'll go ahead and move that we approve 522 Larkin Street, ARP 210211 for preliminary final architectural review of a second-story accessory dwelling unit addition above an existing garage and access stair and deck. Do I hear a second?
Can you add with the conditions that staff recommended?
Sure, with the conditions that staff recommended.
I'll second.
All right, Jennifer, can you do a roll call vote?
Yes. Chair Bluth is recused. Vice Chair Hunter is absent. Committee Member Carter is absent. Committee Member Ostavart.
I seconded, but I.
Thank you. I think we have to redo it anyway,
Okay.
even if we know. Committee Member Polly.
Aye.
Committee Member Schmidt. Oh, are you frozen? No, I just saw her moving.
Aye. Sorry.
Committee Member Treganza.
Aye. So that's a unanimous decision. The motion passes. This may be, this resolution may be appealed within 10 days. 2 days for wireless applications to the Planning Commission. Thank you, staff, applicant, and the public for your participation.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Chris.
Are we moving on to the next agenda item? Or?
We are.
Waiting on Bob.
Bob is.
No, we're waiting on Bob. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, all
On to-
right, I'm back. Why don't we move on to item number 6, which is consider 810 Mckellen Avenue Architecture Review Permit ARP 22-0015 for preliminary and final architectural review of a new 2-story single-family dwelling. I see staff has a presentation up, so we're ready to go.
All right, thank you, Chair. Again, this is Chris Schmidt at the City of Monterey Planning Office, working with the applicant on this project. So the staff recommendation is to approve with conditions of approval. The project site is 810 Mckellen Street. It's located in the new Monterey neighborhood. It's zoned R1. And it's now vacant, but it did previously contain a single family residence that has since been demolished. So the property owner could make room for the proposal here. So you'll note it's on the corner of Mckellen and Archer. And it does have quite a few trees on site. So here's the survey and site plan, and I have a blown up version of the site plan. It's a little easier to read, but generally the home would be located at around the center of the site. The second story is outlined in blue there, with the first story in orange. The driveway entrance is on the right-hand side, which would be Archer Street, and the garage is that first part of the structure that's jetting out on the right-hand side. And so, yeah, you can see the proposed driveway comes in, and one of the parking spaces, if you were to drive into the front of the property, the outdoor parking space is on the left-hand side there, and then the other parking spaces within the garage. So here are the floor plans, and I apologize, they're a little small, but the second story is on the left-hand side, and the first story is on the right. And they're proposing a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a kitchen, dining, open floor plan, kitchen, dining, living room area, and family room. And then a stairway up to the second story where there's excuse me, I think it said 3-bed. There's 4 beds and 2 baths, where there's a master bedroom at the front and a balcony, and then 2 bedrooms at the rear. So on the left-hand side, we have the front elevation, and the right is the rear elevation. And you'll note just the different types of exterior materials proposed. We have wooden shingle siding at the gables, a fiber cement board siding that's kind of appears to be like a lap siding, and then these white fascia boards and a number of other features as well, new windows, of course, and etc. Here's the east side elevation. And I'll note this would be the side that's facing the neighboring property. This is more actually, I think it's appears to be really more of a north side elevation, but this is the side that shares a property line with another residential property. And then the blue line I've shown there, that's the existing grade. So they'll have to do a bit of cut and fill to flatten the lot there as well. And then here's it's not east side, it's really the southwest side. And I just wanted to make note, between these two elevations, there are quite a few more windows on the south side, which is consistent with the new Monterey area plans goals, and will allow a little bit more sunlight to come in and help warm the home, etc. And then the applicant did provide, these were not in the packet, but these are the types of plantings that they'll plant in the front yard, as well as the paver. And I would ask that the applicant clarify just, perhaps maybe not with the committee, but with staff, is there's a condition that they provide more detail on where these plantings might be and what the specific pervious paver design would be. And then I do have a couple other conditions, but moving on to the findings. So staff was able to make the findings. It meets the development standards, including setbacks, and it appears to be cited appropriately. The massing scale and style are compatible with the New Monterey neighborhood. This is kind of similar to a bungalow style. We have a couple of 2-story bungalows, but primarily 1-story. But it's very similar to a lot of the different types of styles we see in New Monterey. The finding regarding views, privacy, and living environment impairments, no impacts have been identified. I did talk to the neighbor who lives directly behind this lot yesterday, and they seem to have no objections. The story poles have been at the site for several months, and this was actually the first time speaking with this person, but I think they may speak today. So staff was able to make this finding. And then the project is consistent with the other city plans and design guidelines, which include not just the development standards, but the single family design guidelines and the New Monterey area plan. As I mentioned, the south windows, and then they are also preserving the existing trees on site. And they did have an arborist involved, which is discussed in your packet, and I've included conditions of approval to further protect those trees. And then lastly, staff was able to make the finding that the exterior materials, finish, color, and all other features are appropriate, and have included conditions of approval for some of those remaining things. And so the first condition would be that they provide detail for landscaping, and they provided the types of plantings, and I think maybe the ARC would want them to provide perhaps locations. Lighting and fencing would also be good if they're going to propose those things. There's no requirement for fencing. I'm sure there may be some exterior lighting fixtures. And then so the recommendation is for staff review before the building permit is issued. And then the second condition of approval is that they adhere to the arborist report's recommendations, copy those recommendations and the city's tree protection guidelines to the building permit plan set before that building permit is issued. So that concludes my presentation. Staff's recommendation is to approve. The applicant is here as well if the committee has any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Does any of the committee members have any questions for Chris?
I do. So there's no tree removal plan? So
Correct. Yeah, no trees are proposed for removal at this time.
so they're not planning on removing any trees?
Correct. Yeah. So if they do move forward and start doing their trenching and grading activities and realize that they're going to have to cut roots that may, cause stability issues or health issues with the trees, they will have to apply for a tree removal permit. In which case the city does require mitigation, plantings as well.
Thank you.
We did, as staff, just to add to that, staff did make an effort to see what sort of design changes or new siding could be done to really protect those trees. And I think they did at least move the driveway a little bit away from, there's a fairly large oak near the driveway. They were previously proposing a pervious concrete driveway, and I think that we decided that it was an impervious concrete driveway, and I had suggested that pervious pavers be used instead to hopefully limit any sort of impact to the tree roots as well.
I do have a few questions. I do walk by this site for years, been walking by and seen this, and I do see that a lot of grading and pruning has already occurred. Is that typical before a permit is issued, or ARC has approved it.
So I know that I'm not sure of how much true grading had occurred. You know, they removed the home that was at the site before, which probably necessitated some sort of heavy machinery to remove it. And then I do know that there was at least one non-native species that was approved for removal by our forestry division. And then clearing of a lot. It was a fairly overgrown site, and I can show a Google Street View image if we want to look at that. But they have removed a lot of vegetation and like I said, the previous building, and it's not atypical that they did receive a demolition permit to remove the home, and then general site work for landscaping or removal of trees always will require a tree removal permit if the tree meets the minimum size requirements. But I didn't think that there was a significant amount of grading, especially near trees, that had occurred. But you're right. I think they did have vehicles on site.
Yeah, I would just typically, I guess, before grubbing and removal, just any of that work, typically you need to have at least a tree protection plan in place. And I'm not seeing one to date, I guess. So it's same with pruning and things. And any of that usually I would think requires some approval, but just clarifying what our standards are in the city. Bob, you're muted if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry. Any other questions for Chris? Does the applicant want to make a presentation?
Hey, this is David Clarke. I'm the designer of the project. So trees were removed. We got a permit for the trees that we removed. The other ones didn't qualify as they were like 2-inch in diameter. We had the arborist on site. Everything was trenched along the lines that the project will be grading on. He saw all the roots that were there and present where the grading will happen. His report has no issue with that and feels that no trees will need to be removed as a result of the construction. And any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any committee questions for the applicant?
Just a quick clarification. He used the word trenching, and I thought, Chris, I thought you said trenching, significant grading hadn't occurred.
So he asked us to dig a small exploratory trench, something 4 inches wide and 2 feet deep or so. That's the only trenching.
Yeah, I'll clarify. Just because staff had concern for the trees, we just suggested, not only working with an arborist, but trying to identify what the roots look like near some of the development areas, so we could really understand whether they would truly be detrimental, damage. There would be detrimental damage by cutting them or anything like that.
Okay, so exploratory trenching with an air spade, or
They're just hand trenched. Yeah.
thank you.
I've got a quick question. It looks like you've got a grading and drainage plan on there. It's got some different colors on it. Was this prepared by Landset engineers?
No, I overlaid the drainage plan on their survey. That was just my coloring.
Okay. It's when you use a title block like that with a licensed engineer and their stamp on it, there's legal issues there. So if you're presenting something as a grading and drainage plan with an engineer's stamp on it, but it's something that you've produced, that's not something you should do.
Sorry, I thought I put my stamp on that one, or my own title block over, but I missed that. Apologize.
Any further committee questions for the applicant? Okay, maybe we can move on. Oh, yeah. Pat,
Sorry,
Ryan, go ahead.
it might be written here, but who is the arborist that's been attached to this?
Frank Ono is the arborist attached to this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, why don't we move on to public comment? Jennifer, do you want to give a brief synopsis of how the public can join in?
Yes, thank you. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864 toll free. Once again, that phone number to call is 833-568-8864. Then enter the webinar ID 161-914-9563. Once again, this meeting's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. I see no hands raised.
Thanks, Jennifer. Maybe we can close public comment since there's no one there, and then move on to committee comment. Does anyone on the committee have any comments to make on the project?
I'll just express what I was hinting at, that, you know, it does seem a little concerning to have that much work done on a site pre-permit or approval. Our Monterey's standards for tree protection are woefully out of date. You know, just slapping a couple used boards onto the trunk of a tree isn't sufficient. We know that, you know, roots are important and impacted. So I'd recommend the city does work on improving our tree protection standards. These are very important assets to our community. And while we of course very much like to let construction happen and know there's a balance in those needs versus our community needs and for what trees provide us, but I think it is something that is serious and should be considered a little more substantially before this much impact is done beforehand. Thankfully I do. Frank Ono is a great arborist, so I'm glad he's on the project. Again, I did see, I mean, there was removal of branches that were the size of some of the trunks of the trees as well. So it's a lot of modification was done on the site that could easily impact the trees. So I'm hopeful that they aren't impacted further. With regards to the driveway and that aspect, while typically I would agree that permeable pavers are preferable because they allow for aeration and water to the roots of the tree. And that really depends on the section and what the arborist's recommendations are. So if there's any roots going under that, your section for your permeable pavement might actually be deeper and more impactful. So it really just needs to be addressed in that regard by the arborist. What's the least impactful solution? Other than that, I don't really, the house seems reasonable. I think I probably have some questions about some of the material changes, but I'll leave that to some of my other colleagues to speak on. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. At the end of the meeting, we can ask maybe Fernanda to look into a staff presentation on the forestry program. Maybe the forester, if time's available, can present to the ARC. So we can maybe at the end of the meeting look at that if you'd like, Brian.
Sure, if they have that available, that'd be great.
Chair Bluth, it looks like we do have some public comments here in the chamber. If you'd like to open it back up for public comment.
Sure. Why don't we open it up for public comment for the people at the City Council chamber?
I do see a hand raised on Zoom as well. So once we do that, You can come up. I just wanted to let the committee know we have a second person with their hand raised.
Thanks, Jennifer.
No problem. Please state your name for the record if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yes, my name is Salvatore Francis. I live at 880 McClellan Avenue. I'm right next door to the property that's being developed. I've lived there since 1996. And that old house that was there was a beautiful raccoon nest. I like to harass my dogs and all the neighborhood cats. I had caught many rats. And so the vegetation was way overgrown. And I just want to say there's little or no grading that I saw on that property. They've been very good about putting the markers up. They cleared a lot of all the brush and a lot of the non-native species. The oaks are great looking. I know one of them's causing trouble for my sewer line, and that's on the Mckellen side. But every 3 years, I have my sewer line snaked out. But I'm looking forward to having this project done. It looks like a beautiful project, and I hope you guys are happy with the work that's going to get done. It's a beautiful project. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Jennifer, do you want to bring the person online to the meeting?
Yes, we have Joanne Chris on the line. I'm asking you to unmute.
I've done so.
Hi there, you're on with the Architectural
Hi.
Review.
I'm sorry, I have prepared comments. I have sent the ARC a letter on this project. I hope that you received it on Monday. My name is Joanne Chris. My husband and I own and live at 585 Archer Street. Will preface my comments with the fact that the property does not in any way impact my view sightline. My comments are made solely as a longtime resident of Archer Street in New Monterey. My primary concerns with the project are as follows, and they can be addressed by either the city staff or the applicant. First, maintenance of the remaining old and tall trees on the property as recommended in the general plan for New Monterey. Second, the applicant's real intent for the property. Third, adequacy of the plans. And fourth, compatibility of the house with others in this area. I am asking that the city forester monitor this project closely. The applicant has engaged an arborist who has determined that hand trenching must be done in order to preserve the trees, and that an arborist be on site full-time during the early stages of the development. The arborist also has indicated that roots should be cut, preferably late June or July. I would like the applicants to address the proposed timing should the project be approved. Improperly cut roots result in destabilization of the trees, thereby allowing the trees to be removed. This would be utterly disgraceful. In addition, I'm sorry, I'm boring you guys. Trees will need to be pruned in order to allow for construction of the second-story balcony. I ask that an arborist familiar with Monterey Code be required on site during this process. Additionally, I ask that a condition for approval of this project be that any tree which is removed be replaced with an identically sized tree. As to the removal of trees raised by the ARC member and the photos from Google Earth, I can assure you that the photos are more than 6 years old. The applicant purchased the property in October of 2021, had plans developed by November of 2021, as we have learned in the arborist report, yet listed the property for sale at a loss of $25,000 in December 2021. As the applicants have a property which is zoned for residential or legal professional use in Pacific Grove, will this become their principal residence, or is this a home being developed for spec purposes? The plans have been prepared by Clarke Homes, an entity owned by the applicant. However, a quick search at the California Secretary of State's website indicates that this entity has been terminated in 2011. A search of architects does not reflect a license for either Mr. Thomas Clarke, or I believe it was a Mr. David Clarke who spoke earlier, in this state. What types of qualifications are required in order to submit plans to the city? When we did our remodel, we had to have architecturally drawn plans and hand stamped by the architect. So I don't see how an entity that is out of business can prepare these plans. Justin, I'm really sorry that you're bored. As I
Not
indicated.
bored, I'm listening.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's just the way you're appearing. In my letter to the ARC, the house is larger in scale than most homes in the surrounding neighborhood. Also, the driveway and front door being sited on Archer rather than McClellan Street is inconsistent with other lots of the same type in our block. That would be the end lots that are narrower and longer. For example, there is an identical size lot at the corner of Hoffman and Archer, and one at the corner of Pine and McClellan, which are sited on the non-Archer street. The siting of the home, of course, impacts setbacks. I ask that these issues be addressed by ARC and staff. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I guess Chris or Fernanda, do you want to attempt to discuss some of the issues that the
Well, I
members
guess
of
the
public
applicant
have?
could answer who they are.
Well, I
and
think
what
we
their
can,
qualifications are.
why don't we start with city staff, and then they can also let us know what's allowable in terms of some of the questions that you provided.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have to allow the applicant to speak again, because we opened public comment a second time.
Sure. Do we want to do that first, Jennifer, or do we want to?
Let's,
I'll let you decide.
let's have staff try to answer some of the questions and then the applicant can follow.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think regarding the trees, the staff recommendation is that the arborist reports recommendations they're essentially a condition of approval, and they have to be added to the project plans, and they do include an arborist on site during grading, so that arborist would oversee any sort of trenching and root cutting. I think and help remind me if I've missed anything. The one of the other questions had to do with qualifications to be able to submit for an application. It's my understanding that a licensed architect is not required to do the drawings for a single family dwelling. When they submit for a building permit, they will have to have anything that's required to be engineered to be stamped by an engineer. But for the purposes of building a single family dwelling, they can apply as owner, builder, and a designer can do the drawings. We work with a lot of designers in the city. Let me see, what else did I miss? In terms of whether someone can come in as a developer and build homes to sell them, the city has no specific requirement that says you can't do that, or it's not clear to me that that's the intent here. I've met with this property owner multiple times, and it's my understanding that they live locally and they do work locally, and so the fact that they build homes elsewhere, I think, is kind of a moot point. This is something that people do for a living, and I'm not sure if they intend to live there. I think they may do that. Did I miss anything else? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe committee member Ostervar might have an idea, but I think the idea there is that maybe you're doing it outside of the rain season, where the soils are drier and impacts to the roots are lesser. The arborist that's what's recommended by the arborist.
I couldn't hear the question.
Neither could I.
So the point made by Ms. Chris was that The arborist recommends that any sort of root cutting activity occur during the months of June and July. And she had asked what the applicant's timeline is, knowing that it is now June. And I, like I said, I would only speculate that that's just the optimal time to do root cutting, perhaps because the roots are maybe drier and could survive. I'm not entirely sure.
That sounds correct, but is the question actually, is the question if they miss that timeline, are they then going to shift their timeline? Who's holding them accountable for doing any cutting in that time period?
That's a really good question. I think, what seems to be the best approach is to, since an arborist is on site, kind of leave it up to the discretion of the arborist, and staff can have regular check-ins with that arborist to understand. And if we wanted to add conditions that the arborist provides, not only regular check-ins, but things like photos and some sort of substantial evidence that they're doing what they're saying that they should be doing, or give the arborist the discretion to say, it's also been dry in September, and I'm going to allow root cutting then as well. Ultimately, I think it makes the most sense to leave that discretion up to the licensed arborist. Thanks.
Was there any comment in the council chamber?
Would any of you like to provide a comment? If you're the applicant, would you want to come back up and speak again? You can. Does the committee have any questions for the applicant?
I do have a follow-up question based on a comment that we received, the last commenter that we received. Am I allowed to ask that of staff right now, or do we need to wait till ARC comment period?
It sounds like we're in the ARC comment
Yeah,
period.
you can ask staff.
Okay.
I do see another hand raised. It is Joanne Christ again. It is up to the chair if we want to reopen public comment for a third time. Otherwise, public comment period has already passed.
Yeah, I think we did our 3 minutes. So I think we should just move on. Is there a comment that the applicant wanted to make to reply to any of the issues that were brought up?
I don't believe they do, and I'm sorry, Committee Member Polly, if I interrupted you. But I do believe we have offered the applicant another chance to speak and they declined. So I think we are in the committee member comments portion of this meeting, this item.
Okay, Justin, what was the question you had for?
Well, it's going back to the Claridge Homes comment, and apparently they're a shuttered business, regardless of whether or not, and staff is correct, you do not need to be a licensed architect to design a single family residence in the state of California. But even without a license, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with presenting a set of drawings to the city. A set of drawings that reflect a house that's going to be built. And if that is presented by a company that is no longer a legal entity, where are we at? Is anyone's names on these title blocks? And, again, I bring it up because if I had drawn a plan at some point in my career and stamped it and had my stamp on it, and I saw that plan presented with my stamp with someone else's drawing over it, I'd have an attorney. And we've got a company that clearly is not a legal entity, and they presented a set of plans to the city. We need to have a name attached to this. There needs to be a responsible party. And I think that's a fair comment from the neighbor that brought it up.
So,
and that's a question for staff. I mean, it's a very nuanced area. Is there a requirement for whoever's submitting, who is the responsible party here for these plans?
Well, so our planning application form is required to be signed by the applicant and the property owner. They did sign, they also signed the indemnification agreement that's required. And we do not check to see if the designer is a legal designer or a legal company. We rely on the building division to check off any building requirements at the building stage. Like Chris mentioned, any engineering or stamped documents that are required. And so at the planning stage, the plans are very conceptual, and they may change at the building permit stage, but the ARC is responsible for looking at the mass form, siding, and architectural style. And that has been in the past. We've had multiple drawings done by non-licensed designers.
Justin, I see your hands raised. Do you have a comment, follow-up?
I don't think my hand is raised.
No, I see a little hand over your, oh, it was probably, oh, it was my cursor on you. When I put my cursor on you, it makes a hand. Sorry.
If I attempt to clarify, so are we saying that basically the owner who's signed these drawings is the one accountable for the drawings at this point?
I believe they've signed the application, but not the drawings.
Right.
Are they
So
the responsible party?
Yeah, I wasn't sure we got it. I didn't feel like there was a clear answer there, but
yeah.
The property owner is responsible for the application and the submitted plans and from a planning perspective. But those then get converted to construction drawings at the building permit stage. And that's when the necessary licenses are required, such as in any engineering, like shear wall calculations that are required. Those need a stamp by an engineer.
And I guess I have one more question. What is the city's rules on trimming of branches? What are the city's rules with regards to the trimming of branches? I know that most jurisdictions, and I'm sorry I don't know this, but most jurisdictions do have regulations as they relate to the trimming of certain diameter branches. And it would, as Commissioner Ostovar has implied that there have been some fairly large branches trimmed on that tree. Does the city of Monterey have regulations with regards to these size of a diameter of a branch that can be trimmed without a permit from the city?
So we do have tree pruning regulations, and they're included in the city's tree preservation ordinance. So substantial tree trimming does require a permit. And it was mentioned earlier that the applicant obtained city forestry permit approval, and our forestry division approves or denies any tree trimming. So
they did, okay, so they did get a permit for the branch trimming.
That's what was stated, but I can let Chris elaborate because he's the project planner. But it did sound like the forestry division issued a permit for tree trimming.
Yeah, that's correct. And I did meet with the city's forester at the site twice to assess any sort of impact related to grading. But he had mentioned that they also, in addition to removing some of the vegetation at the site, they had done some pruning that they had approved. So.
Any other comments?
Are we in comments or questions? I'm not sure where we are.
I think we're in, at this point, I think we're in committee comments.
Okay, well, I think my comment is, it seems like as a committee, we're kind of, forgive the pun, getting off into the weeds a little bit here on licensing and who's an architect and who's not. And that's not really our purview. I think, mass and scale and staff recommendations and setbacks and stuff like that is what we're supposed to be looking at as a committee. So I just want to kind of make sure that we're not, getting off the track of what our goal is or what our charter is as a committee, as an ARC committee member. Thank you.
I'll just counter that a little bit. I think it is, we need to be clear about the credibility of what we're reviewing in order to review it properly. So I think it is very important that we trust what we're reviewing as credible, and that we're understanding the process that got us to where we are. So I do think it is the things that we are discussing. And trees are very much a part of the public sphere and what we see here. So those aspects are important. And also, if we're approving something that may not actually come to fruition as we're approving it, that's an issue. So, and that relates to credibility.
Yeah, just to reiterate, we were not asking whether someone was a licensed architect or a non-licensed architect. The statement was clearly made that you do not need to be a licensed architect. I think that the larger question is who's responsible for the plans. And there's the name of a company that apparently doesn't exist on the title block. And I think that's, people come to present plans to the ARC and they're responsible for those plans. And I think that's a legitimate question.
Could I get clarification again? From my experience, when I was in planning, we're looking at uses, whether things meet certain regulations. Then time with the building department, is that correct?
We missed your question, committee member Schmidt. I do think your computer froze a little bit. If you need to turn off your video while you speak, I think that could help your connection.
Okay, I'll do that.
Let's try that again.
So I just want to confirm with Fernanda that I understood correctly, and with my experience working in a planning department, that the planning department is looking at, and by planning department, I also mean by extension, consistent with the zoning requirements, architectural standards, etc. The integrity of the structure comes at a later time.
Sorry,
Or-
your comment it was still cutting out.
Make your own decisions, Gwen.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so for a third time, I'll try to condense it in case I freeze up again. I just want to confirm that the planning department is looking at zoning, whether it's compatible with the various zoning requirements appropriate for the site, etc. Then structural integrity, being licensed architectural or structural engineer drawings, comes at the building department stage, which we are not yet at. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So what ARC should be looking at is whether the project's consistent with the appearance of the surrounding area, whether it meets the neighborhood, as well as the zoning requirements, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
One other thought is that we didn't really get the plans for the gardening, the details for where all the plants were going to be. I'm just wondering, maybe it's worth asking the applicant to come back and provide that information along with some of the other issues that have come up. And then, maybe we can have a lot of these issues that we've been discussing clear it up, and at the same time have more information that we can vote on as a committee and not necessarily go to staff for them just to approve it later on.
I do want to add, if we let the applicant speak again, we do have to open public comment again.
So I wasn't asking that. I was just saying that we could just basically table this, ask the applicant to come back with all the information that they need for the project, which includes the gardening information and the paver information. And then some of the issues that Justin and Brian have brought up.
Yes, we could vote to continue the item or to table it. If we continue it, it would be to a date certain, one of our other scheduled meetings coming up, or we can table it, which means we would have to renotice it. It would be advised to continue it if possible, if we think that we can come back at a certain date.
And you can also separate the preliminary versus final architectural review. So the preliminary is the first 3 findings, and the final is the 4th finding that talks about finishes, landscaping, and other materials.
Priam and Justin, any comments or?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just gonna say, I'm open to what other committee members have to say. I'm not sure I'm suggesting tabling. In some ways, a lot of this seems, it's really about process that the city currently allows and applies. It does seem like those things for the most part have occurred as far as I can tell. While I do have some concerns. Most of that has passed at this point with regards to the trees. Just things that happened before it seemed like they should have, but the arborist is involved. I think if we required further sign off from the arborist at different stages, and that makes it to the committee or to the planning office, that's likely sufficient. I think there are still some concerns about just making sure what we're seeing is complete and done by a reputable person that can be accountable for what we're seeing. It sounds like you're saying that's the owner at this point. That sounds like that is planning department's call to make. So I don't have significant concerns apart from the ones I've already raised that have to do with some of the process that's already occurred.
Is a landscape plan a requirement of final design review?
Yeah, landscaping is part of the final review designs, the final designs finding. The degree to which a landscape plan is adequate is kind of subject to the ARC or staff's discretion. And on their plan, they do show a site plan note that says, it basically says that, drought tolerant succulents and the like would be planted in the front yard. And so I asked the applicant to provide a little bit more detail, maybe specific plantings. And he showed these graphics that I showed today. The ARC could recommend they return with an actual landscape plan that shows individual locations and things like irrigation. They can defer that to staff and be very specific that that's what they want to see. It's really up to the ARC on how they want to treat it. I have seen projects approved by the ARC where simply the plant types were provided and locations were not shown, and they've been approved. So it's
I just feel like with each new month we're seeing less and less complete plans. And here, if a landscape plan is a requirement of final approval, and they've shown us a plan where half the lot is gravel and the other half is bark chips, and they put a little note down in the corner that says, we're going to use drought tolerant plants. it just begs the question of why we're even requiring landscape plans. So,
Yeah, the only added comment I'd say, Chris, you mentioned fence, that a fence was likely going to be in this. That does impact the public appearance of a site and how you interact. So I think a fence would be something I would want to see. And then also, just as happens if you have other large patios and things like that, those can have an impact on your neighbors or trees and things like that. And so without that, it's hard to say if they are planting that. It sounds like we've left it open for a number of those things to happen. The planting is maybe a little less of a concern, but if there's aspects that really could affect neighbors, the appearance from the streets and public like that, that does seem like something we should be approving and reviewing. But otherwise, I think things are underway. And so I don't know, I guess what I'm suggesting based on that, if we agree, it would be to review a plan as part of a secondary approval at a later date.
Well, I also agree with what Patrick was saying. We don't want to get too much into the weeds, and I think staff could work some of these issues in getting the details firmed up for the project. But I think maybe we should shoot for a motion. I mean, Justin Priam, you've had some good comments. Do you want to shoot at a motion that you think would address some of the issues in terms of, do we want to do preliminary, final, and then I think, what was it that Fernanda had passed on, preliminary and final, and then, have that come back to us for the part that's missing?
Can I make one more comment? Before we
Sure.
go to making a motion? Chris, do fences have to meet ARC approval?
No. Fences are not a requirement either for a new home. In fact, staff does not require permits for fencing throughout the city, with the exception of commercial properties usually. And so, I did suggest if the applicant was going to propose a new fence, they could provide those details. I think that at this time they were not proposing a fence.
Thank you.
And then in that same light, I don't think that there were any new patio areas that they're proposing either.
Thank you. So I just have a couple more comments. Basically reiterating what I said before. I just want to make sure that we're staying within the bounds of our committee. We've got a neighbor on one side that is all thumbs up. Please build a new house here. It's going to be fantastic. We've got another neighbor who doesn't sound like she's necessarily against the project, but has a lot of questions. But according to, the rules of the road with the city building, those questions don't necessarily need to be answered. So I just hate to be, one of these entities that just slows things down for the sake of slowing things down, because we want more and more details on, landscaping drawings and planting plans. And, I think this site has, the fact that they're not asking to remove any trees is miraculous in my opinion. So I'd really like to, in my opinion, just move forward with this with a motion to approve, but I'll defer to committee members. Thank you.
Any other comments? Well, Patrick, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I will move to approve 810 Mckellen Avenue Architectural Review Permit ARP 22-0015 for preliminary and final architectural review for a new 2-story single family dwelling. Were there any conditions that staff had?
There were 2.
Correct.
Okay. With the 2 conditions that staff had in the presentation. Do you want me to read those, Jennifer, or is that good enough. All right, thank you.
No, this is good. Thank you.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have Patrick making the motion and Shelley seconding. Jennifer, could you please do a roll call?
Yes. Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter and Committee Member Carter are absent. Committee Member Ostervar.
Aye.
Committee Member Polly,
No.
Committee Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Committee Member Tregenza.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. This motion carries with a vote of 4, and it is appealable to the Planning Commission with forms found available at the planning office within the next 10 days.
Thank you. That was a great discussion on that one. Maybe we can discuss it more at the end of the meeting. Why don't we move on to the next item on the public appearance items, which is consider 1042 Del Monte Avenue sign permit application SI-21-0214 for the partial internal illumination of one existing vehicle-oriented freestanding sign. Does staff has a presentation on that?
Yes, thank you. My name is Christy Sabdo, Associate Planner with the City of Monterey. And let me share my screen here. Exit out of this one. Okay. All right, thank you. The project is 1042 Del Monte Avenue. It's consideration of a sign permit application for the partial internal illumination of one existing vehicle-oriented freestanding sign. The property is located at the corner of Camino Aguajito and Del Monte Avenue. The general plan designation is commercial. The zoning is C2, and it's located in the Oak Grove neighborhood. So this is just showing a picture of the sign where the partial illumination is proposed. It's a vehicle-oriented sign, existing sign. They are not proposing to relocate the sign or change the height or anything. Basically, all they're proposing is the partial illumination of this existing sign. So what you see is proposed, and I think I have it on the next slide. The area on the left that's outlined in red, the letters, gasoline, self-serve, regular, all of the words would be highlighted or illuminated, and so would the prices. And the background, the blue, would be opaque. And then as proposed currently on the right side, the Chevron sign with Techron would be fully illuminated, although I will present an alternative that was provided to the applicant after the staff report was downloaded. So the proposal would also include controls that would enable LED brightness and warmth levels to be adjusted consistent with the illumination guidelines. And the sign location, height, area, materials, and colors are proposed to remain unchanged. So looking at the illumination guidelines in the sign guidelines, the light, so this is one that's partially inconsistent. The guideline is the light source, the bulb should be shielded from view to prevent glare. Use simple shade devices consistent with the building design. And I think I'm going to go over these more in detail in the findings, but this was partially consistent. The lighting should be focused on the sign. The proposal is not consistent with this. And again, I'll go over that in the findings more in detail. And then indirect illumination and exceptionally designed internal illumination are preferred. staff considered this partially inconsistent. So finding one, the proposal achieves the purposes and objectives of the sign ordinance. The proposal is consistent with the sign ordinance in that the proposal does not constitute a proliferation of signs. There will not be any additional signs, just the existing sign. The existing sign would continue to serve to identify the Chevron gas station, and there would be no extraneous signs. Finding two, the proposal is generally consistent with the citywide sign guidelines as conditioned. I'll talk about that in a minute. In summary, the proposal is consistent with all illumination guidelines with the exception of three. It's inconsistent with one and partially inconsistent with two guidelines, which I'll discuss here. The proposal would be inconsistent with the Illumination Guideline, which states the lighting should be focused on the sign. The proposal consists of internally illuminating the existing vehicle-oriented sign. The LED lights would illuminate the letters and numbers from inside the sign. The lighting would not be focused on the sign. Therefore, it's going to be inconsistent. There's really no getting around that. The project is partially inconsistent with the guideline, which states the light source should be shielded from view to prevent glare. Use simple shade devices consistent with the building design. The project is also partially inconsistent with the guideline that states indirect illumination and exceptionally designed internal illumination are preferred. The proposed internally illuminated sign is not overall exceptionally designed. And the reason why staff states that is because on the right side, this chevron with Techron would be completely illuminated. And so we had prepared a special condition of approval that would require partial illumination of this sign. And the applicant has actually submitted that plan kind of past staff's deadline to provide this to ARC. So it's here, where on the left side would be the same as proposed. On the right side, the white and blue background would be opaque. The letters and chevron and the logo would be lit. So that's the proposed redesign. Kind of the applicant was responding to staff's special condition that we are proposing. Finding three, the proposed illuminated signs are substantially consistent with the Monterey general plan and is not within any neighborhood or specific plan areas. The general plan urban design element policy F9 states discourage high levels of ambient light and maintain night skies where stars can be seen. The proposed internally illuminated sign would not include uplighting and would comply with the maximum lighting and warmth levels. Staff recommends that the Architectural Review Committee adopt a resolution approving sign permit application for the partial illumination of one vehicle-oriented freestanding sign at 1042 Del Monte Avenue. The Architectural Review Committee can choose to eliminate the special condition and approve the redesign that staff showed you. And that's the end of staff's presentation. I believe the applicant was going to be online if you have any questions for him.
Are there any committee questions for Christy?
Christy,
Yes.
recommendation also apply to the redesign as submitted after the staff report was prepared?
So yes, staff has deadlines in order for everything to be noticed on time. And so the applicant had provided that redesign afterwards. That's why it wasn't included in the packet, if I answered your question correctly.
Does staff find that more consistent with the policy than the previous design?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Christy? So Christy, just a quick question. I'm assuming the gas prices, it's a digital display for those?
Correct. They would be changing digitally. Yes.
Is this a time for questions to the applicant as well?
Yes. If you have no further questions for staff.
Okay, does the applicant want to give a presentation?
We do have somebody on the line, and I do believe it's the applicant raising their hand. Nigel? You should be available to speak.
I think you can possibly hear me now, hopefully. Yeah, I really can't add anything to what Christy has presented, other than the fact, just to stress that the existing sign is internally illuminated, and this project really is to just convert the price digits to LED. Pretty simple, straightforward project. So yeah, I really can't add any more to what Christy has said.
Any questions for the applicant? Jennifer, can you make your abbreviated comment on how people can get in touch
Yes.
with the
To join
committee?
a Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, toll free. Once again, that phone number to call is 833-568-8864. Then enter the webinar ID 161-914-9563. Once again, this meeting's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide public comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. I see no hands raised.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I don't see any either. Maybe we can move from public comment and open to committee comments. Any comments from the committee?
I seem to remember we've done this a number of times, changed a sign that you have to go out and like change the numbers by hand to a digital sign that is LED illuminated. So it seems like we're keeping in the tradition of the way things are going. It sounds like the sign ordinance needs to be updated because a lot of that old verbiage doesn't necessarily address the new technologies like LED lights and internal illumination, stuff like that. But I other than that, I think this is just pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually ready to say no to this. I think this level of illumination on a very public, typically dark street does change the character, and it's right within view of several parks, the ocean, things like that. But as the applicant noted, it's already backlit. They're really just adding the digital signage, which is more for convenience. So given that the changes are rather minor, it does seem like it's acceptable in that regard.
Any other comments? Would someone like to try to make a motion on it?
I'll move to approve 1042 Del Monte Avenue sign permit application SI 210214 for the partial internal illumination of one existing vehicle oriented freestanding sign. No conditions, correct?
Can you clarify if you're adding the image that Christy presented as the exhibit?
The redesign by the applicant. Yes.
Do we want to have the redesign as part of it? Yes, we do. Okay, so yeah, and that's going to be with the late coming staff approved redesign, which is going to limit some of the internal illumination of the right-hand side of the sign.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. So we have Patrick making a motion and Justin seconding. Jennifer, could you please do a roll call vote?
Yep, Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hunter and Committee Member Carter are both absent. Committee Member Ostavar,
Aye.
Committee Member Pauly,
Aye.
Committee Member Schmidt,
Aye.
and Committee Member Tregenza.
Aye.
Thank you. This motion carries with a vote of 5, and it is appealable to the planning office with forms found at the planning office within the next 10 days.
Thank you. Do we have any other committee comments?
Not on this project.
I was just thinking in general.
Yeah, well, in general, if we are going there now, I mean, I'm just reading, our role off of the website, and, this includes on-site circulation, grading, tree impacts, building placement, landscape areas, and planting, as well as architectural style, bulk. These things all matter. So I'm not sure, I agree that it does seem strange that we've been seeing less and less of those things that are part of our charter. And I think that is significant.
I really thank you for chiming in on that, because the quality of the drawings just seems to be getting worse and worse, and the amount of information that they're providing seems to be getting worse and worse. And here we've had a whole submittal of drawings that we don't even know who prepared them. And we've had them basically plagiarize another licensed professional stamp. And I don't take it lightly, and I feel it's within our realm of responsibility to point that out.
So in at least today's discussions, there's 3 things that I see that have come up, I think more than a couple times. One was plans and the quality of the plans. And I think Justin's mentioned that and Brian a few times. The other is the forestry issues. I think we've discussed before whether we can get the forester to come in and give us a presentation. Another is, as Patrick brought up, the sign ordinance. So I'm wondering if Fernanda, I know that life is busy for you already, but do we want to look at some of these issues as staff presentations over the next couple months so we can, more thoroughly address the issues that seem to be coming up?
So the first issue regarding the preparation of plans by a designer or versus architect.
And the detail.
And the what?
And the detail.
Oh, and
the amount of.
It's the second time that someone's tried to bring it back to designer versus architect, and that is not the issue. We are fully aware that a designer is allowed to design a house. It's the quality of the plans.
So we have submittal requirements that are adopted by the ARC. The last time that they were adopted was in 2016, I believe. And those submittal requirements, it's a list of plans and drawings that need to be submitted. And, they include site plans, elevations, etc. But nowhere in that submittal checklist does it say that the plans need to be drawn by a designer or like it doesn't refer to any sort of quality metrics. So that's why the planning division has difficulty requiring such a thing. As long as they meet the submittal requirements and they meet the zoning development standards, and they show, for example, the building height, that it's drawn to scale, etc., we cannot reject plans. We could revisit that submittal checklist if the ARC desires to update it.
Fernanda, could you send a copy of that out to all the members?
Yes, I can do that.
So why, let me ask that, if a landscape plan is part of the required submittal, why was it recommended that we give final approval to a project that didn't have one?
So landscaping is not required for every parcel in the city. For example, we do not have a requirement that landscaping be provided for R1 lots. So 810 Mckellen Street is an R1 zoned lot, and there is no requirement anywhere in the zoning ordinance that requires landscaping. So they can have zero landscaping, dirt, they can just have dirt around their house. When we do receive a landscaping plan, like they did as part of the 810 Mckellen submittal, we do ask that they provide the plant species and the locations. But again, there is no standard that we can measure the landscaping plans against.
So just so I can clarify, you do not require landscaping, but you do require a landscape plan as part of the package. Am I wrong on that, or
So it's in the
on the
submittal.
submittal checklist, a landscape plan?
Yes, there is a line that says if you want final architectural review, you need to submit final details like materials, colors, etc. And you can submit landscaping, but again, it's not required by the zoning ordinance for R1 lots. For the Garden Road projects, it is required in the zoning ordinance that for the Garden Road multifamily building projects that they provide shared open space that includes landscaping and public amenities. So that's why for those, it was definitely required and it was mentioned to the applicants. But for single family homes in the R1 district, it's not required.
Fernanda, how do we go about reviewing and updating that checklist that you mentioned?
So
It's in 2016.
staff can talk to the community development director because she manages our work program, and we can present this new work program item to her and discuss, how much staff time it would take, and then come back to you maybe for a presentation of the submittal checklist. We can gather feedback from you. And that's how we could start.
Okay, maybe we could ask him to at least consider that. And I unfortunately won't be available for the next meeting, but I'll be on travel. But maybe that can come up as part of the ARC and as an update, and we can then continue the discussion and hopefully work with Kim on looking at reevaluating that checklist.
Well, yeah, and Bob, I don't want to. Yeah, I think maybe as a first step, let's all just review the checklist.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it in a long time, and rather than getting staff involved or any administrator involved in that, let's just all take a look at the checklist and let's be aware of it for the meetings. And I don't really want to be the hard one about all of this, but just as an architect, I look at what we go through in other jurisdictions and the quality of the plans that we're required to submit in other jurisdictions. And I can tell you that a lot of what was submitted tonight would have been rejected. To come in and show all bark and all gravel on a plan, and I mean, some of the questions about the work that's been done on the site, the grading, and there was questions.
Well, I think that 2016 maybe that's long enough of a time frame where it probably deserves to be reevaluated. I definitely would like to look at what we have, but I'd also like to see if Kim could at least give us an idea of staff's time to be able to look at it, and then maybe that comes up at the next meeting and you guys can discuss it again.
I can make him aware of your request and then come back with a more detailed timeline or number of hours that it would take to revise the checklist.
Right, and then we can evaluate it based on that information.
Okay.
If it's going to be a really big project, then maybe we just work better with what we've already got. But since it was started in 2016, and I think some of these issues have come up before, it seemed that it might be worth reevaluating it.
Can I ask one question on that checklist? Given that it's not in front of me, I could probably bring it up, but is the grading and drainage plan required to be completed by a licensed civil engineer?
Not in that checklist.
Not in the checklist. Okay.
One of the other issues was the forester. We've discussed a number of issues associated with that. Is it possible to see if the forester has time, maybe in the next couple of meetings coming up, to be available for a presentation, and maybe we could ask forester questions at that time?
So yes, I can ask the forestry division to, again, I would have to get approval from the park superintendent, or the Parks and Rec division, director. But yes, I can ask for a presentation on the tree protection standards. And we can gather feedback then from all of you.
Thank you. And then the other issue was the sign ordinance. Is that something that we can engage on, or is that something that we just, maybe you can mention it's come up in the ARC to the appropriate people and it needs to be reevaluated given some of the issues that have come up before us?
So yes, the sign ordinance, an update. It would be more of an update to the sign guidelines, I believe, because the sign guidelines contain lighting standards. So that would also become a work item to be approved by the community development director. And I'm still curious though, which lighting standards you would want staff to look at again. Just the digital display of gas price signs?
I think was that in the internal illumination overall, wasn't it?
Oh, okay.
Patrick, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, I think it was, Christie had to say, well, it partially doesn't meet this because it's direct illumination. It's like but it's talking about an incandescent bulb versus an LED, and LEDs don't have shading. So in that case, it's an old standard that doesn't necessarily address modern technologies. And then there's like halo lighting and stuff like that. So that's what I was talking about, is that it's forcing staff to come up with reasons that it doesn't, fit guidelines when it's talking about a completely different technology that didn't exist when that was written, is what I was talking about.
That makes sense. Like I said, I think I would need direction from our director first. Just because we do acknowledge that the technology changes, so there's probably room for improvement in our lighting standard.
Well, maybe you could get with Kim and see where she falls on some of those requests.
Okay, and I can back.
Yeah, I would almost add another layer to that, and I wonder if it should be reviewed, and I'd be interested to get the other ARC members' opinions on this. Whether more of these signage proposals could be reviewed at the staff level without going to ARC. I've often felt that a lot of these could be handled at the staff level and not go to public hearing. It just seems like quite a process for staff to prepare a report and a presentation for what are really quite simple, projects. And I just wonder if it's time to look at that.
I'll just add quickly, just since we're having a conversation, generally I fully agree with streamlining, et cetera, and the importance of that. I mean, adding more red tape is part of what's killing the development of our cities and all of that. But at the same time, signage you know, there's a tendency, I think, for signage, especially in a touristy town, to start to go over the top and for it to start to look more like a strip mall. And I have seen a few signs come across our desk that were questionable. A lot of them have been fantastic and I think fit the character of Monterey. But I do think as a community, we want to be careful about what we are allowing because they just start to compete with each other. That's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to grab your attention. And if we start to have Del Monte looking like a, typical sort of strip mall street, that's not going to be the welcoming character that we want for Monterey. So I actually agree that I think it is significant enough for the ARC to review. But if the planning documents are crafted carefully enough, then it likely doesn't need to come across our desk.
I guess that's what I'm wondering. If the things were updated to accommodate LED and new, pricing, signage, technology and whatnot, and there were clear parameters, i.e. a box drawn around what we think is feasible, and a presentation is made that fits within that box. Is that something, I agree with you. If someone's asking for a deviation from approved guidelines, then hey, let's bring it to the ARC. But if something is fitting within, on particular corridors and they're fitting within those regulations, is that something that really needs to go to a public hearing?
That being said, I think it maybe that document would need approval from the ARC.
Right. Yeah.
That's creating that framework. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the framework that was created by the ARC, I believe 2016 was the last time that our sign guidelines were revised. They wanted to see all internally illuminated signs at the ARC level. So if you're proposing a change to that, and that would reduce many of the signs that you would see.
Well, I think that the issue would be what the new guidelines would be, and then how those new guidelines would then reflect what would go to an ARC approval. Maybe as an exception, if rules need to be bent or it doesn't fit, then some cases it comes to ARC. But I think it's worth the discussion.
Yeah, I think internal illumination is significant. Like I said, I was prepared to say no to this, but it was already internally illuminated. I think that changes the character of a street like this. The McDonald's down the street, right, doesn't look like a McDonald's. It doesn't have internally illuminated signs that I can recall. But a lot of it is very different to keep in that character of our street that welcomes a lot of visitors. And so I don't know. I actually think I agree with internally illuminated signage being reviewed because it can have a significant impact.
Fernanda, could you send us all the document that you mentioned on the from the ARC approved request for what the committee's going to see for signs?
Oh, would you like a copy of the sign guidelines?
Yeah, maybe you could just send a copy of it to all of us, along with the other document we requested.
Okay, I can do that.
I do want to discuss, it would be a Brown Act violation if any of you discuss how you feel about those sign guidelines, as it will likely be returned to the ARC. So please, if we send that to you, just don't share your feelings about it. It would be a violation. Thank you. You can.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure.
Yeah.
To clarify, and share your feelings in the meeting next time we talk about this.
Correct, just not in the email, right? Like we're obviously sharing our feelings right now and our opinions.
Yes, so
Right.
not
As part of the open meeting.
not an
Correct.
email thread, and also it would be a violation if you were to discuss any of this with more than one member of the outside public. So if you go to, home to your neighbors or something and you're talking about how you feel about them, that would also be a violation, including any type of social media posts or anything along those lines.
Thanks,
Can I-
Jennifer.
I'm sorry to belabor this, but can I ask a follow-up question on, it seems like a bit of a conflict or tension that, there's a number of checklist items that we're supposed to review, planting, landscaping, these different things, but it sounds like, Fernando, what you just said was that essentially there's a loophole, which is you can insert a plan because it's part of the checklist, but it can essentially have nothing on it. And that I'm not being flip.
No, I know. That was
Serious,
actually
like-
quite surprising to me too. And that's what we saw tonight.
If that's approvable, if that's actually acceptable, then it's just what somebody can just say, say this is a landscape plan and not have anything on it, and that's okay.
Well, so the middle checklist is all encompassing, so there are things there that won't apply to every project. So like if it's a remodel of a second story, landscaping is not gonna apply usually. They might just want to redo their second story and nothing else. So it's just whatever applies at the applies to the permit project description.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that discussion. Fernanda, do you have any staff reports for us?
Let's see. Oh, so next time we will have a new chair. So we rotate ARC chair and vice chair in July. So Ed Hunter is the vice chair, so he would be up for the chair position, and then Patrick Tregan would be up for the vice chair position. And that's gonna be an agenda item next time. So you can all discuss it at the meeting next time. Yes. And then we have 165 Via Gayuba, which was continued today, would go to the July 6th meeting. And 351 Watson Street, I think it's a tentative item. Not sure if it's gonna make it into the agenda.
Thanks, Fernanda. I guess this might be my last day as chair. So.
Good job.
No, thank you. So on this next month, but I hope it turns out to be a good meeting, and thank you everybody for coming, and thanks Fernanda, Chris, Christy, and Jennifer for all your hard work on helping us out as ARC.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for accommodating all of our questions.
Okay, I'll close the meeting at 6:13. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Record.